Just a quick disclaimer to any of our new or past listeners. This is the first episode back in about a year and a half, so I am just getting back into the swing of editing, and Nick is getting back into talking to a microphone. So the audio is pretty rough, and technically this is not the most polished episode, but I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope you enjoy it either way. Jump into this like we do every week. Welcome back to another episode of the Bladeology podcast. You might have noticed that it has been a minute since we have recorded an episode. In fact, it might have been a couple minutes. That is for a plethora of reasons, which we are going to dive into tonight. As a warning to our listeners, if you are not a long-term listener or a listener of previous episodes, this is not the episode. I repeat, this is not the episode to start on. This episode is going to be catching up on a great deal of topics that are important but are not guest-related or otherwise. So just letting you know, if this is your first episode, go listen to the last episode with Sam, because that one's actually really funny. Or listen to the next episode that we're going to record over this, or rather after this. So let's see where to start. The Bladeology podcast was originally started... I'm already not remembering, but it was a while ago, and it was originally myself, Jeremiah Burbank,
Nick Choprin of NCC Knives,
and there was a third, Elijah Isham, our very good friend, who unfortunately passed away a little early, and I'm going to digress for a second. So this podcast for me started as a really good way to continue to connect with my friends and talk with people who were or are knife makers, and to continue a conversation on the microphone that we have at shows, and to check in with everybody. So basically every episode of Bladeology that you've ever heard, there was an hour in front, and there was probably another hour or sometimes 2 hours behind each episode that we weren't recording, that Nick and Elijah and I just talked shit and laughed, and it was a good thing for the three of us to sort of on a regular basis check in with each other and laugh and, just sort of connect, because for a few years before everything kind of went crazy, we were going to shows all the time. We were hanging out all the time. We were constantly talking. And the podcast was sort of an extension of that. It was a logical next step. It was something that the three of us had sort of come together on. I won't take too much credit, but I'll take, for pushing it off and getting it started as a way for the three of us to hang out and also to talk to our friends and people that I wanted to interview, and I wanted to record a lot of historical knife-making things, and I wanted to hang out with my friends, so the podcast was a logical step forward in that direction to do that. And it just sort of developed over the years and became this thing. It became this staple in everybody's life, in our lives. That's my bit. That's where I'm coming from on that one with the podcast. And moving forward without Elijah, we've built up a really great catalog of interviews, and I don't want to start another podcast. I want to keep this podcast going because I want to be true to the interviews we've already done. And I think that Elijah would appreciate us continuing and continue to record. It's like when you watch a TV series on your streaming service and the character no longer exists and they died in like episode 2, but as part of the contract, that actor's credit has to be in every episode until the end of the series. So that's the best analogy I can come up with, which is sitting down tonight to record this episode. I actually listened to the intros of a bunch of previous episodes and I laughed, and it made me feel really good to hear Elijah's voice. And that's another thing, is that he passed, but the past episodes of Bladeology, you can listen to them depending on your whatever. You can hear Elijah's voice, and that will sort of continue, and it's not going anywhere because it's on the internet, and things that are on the internet never go away. For the better, for the worse, they're there for fucking ever. So we're gonna soldier on, Nick and I, right?
Yep.
And we're gonna continue to record because this is something that Nick and I want to do. We want to continue doing this podcast, and there's a lot that has changed that we're gonna get into. Nick, did you have anything you want to go on about the Elijah thing?
You said it well. Like, we're both on the same page here as far as how we want to run this. There's no reason to make a new one. It has been some time since we recorded. A lot has happened. We will mention it in this episode and in the future episode. But yeah, it's a great way to carry on the legacy of what Elijah did. Still obviously talk about it time to time as what he's done over the last
Right.
few years.
It's kind of an ongoing conversation, and it comes up. But I think as far as the podcast goes, we're both want to go forward and continue this as something that we're interested in, and certainly as obviously Elijah's legacy, and that's a big part of it. And it's inevitable. It's going to come up in future episodes. It comes up all the time. I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, Elijah would have loved this," like whatever. So we're going to do it. We're going to keep going. The intro music is still beside me. I'm not really entirely sure what to do about that. I'll probably run his intro music for this one just because it's sort of whatever. And then we'll figure out some new intro music in the future. I don't know. Anyway, so Bladeology news. Elijah, he's not here. This is the two of us. That's definitely part of the news. As far as guests and the lineup, so I did all of the guest lineups in the past for the show. And the nice thing about jumping back into this, like we're doing now, is I have a whole list of guys that were down to be interviewed and to be a part of the podcast, and that list is still here, and I've connected with a few of them, and I've added some new ones to the roster for this new round. I'm not sure this is the new season or whatever. So I've got a lot of great guests. I don't know if I want to spoil it just yet, but I have some pretty heavy names that I don't want to tell you yet. It's going to be great. But I've got some pretty serious people that might only sit down with me and talk about things as a hint to who that might be. You never know. That could be anybody. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this. I know Nick and I are going to try to sit down on a more regular basis and talk it out and have some good conversations with you guys. Going forward, we hope to be more productive. Definitely probably going to shoot for the once or twice a month thing to start with, see how that rolls. Keep the episodes medium length. I know in the past we've kind of gone on, and I definitely want to shoot for like a very consumable episode. If it's not an interview episode, and if it is, it might run long. But yeah, so look forward to that. I've got some awesome guests coming up, some really old school guys and some very new school guys. So that's going to be great. Let's jump into some pretty interesting things here. So since the last time we've talked, there's been an immense amount of change. There's been some tectonic shifts in our physical reality for Nick and I. And one of those, to start with, which hopefully won't be too bad in this recording, Nick and I are actually in the same room recording this podcast, which is
different than our usual setup.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is only the second or third time we've ever done that. Once or twice with Elijah, I think after the show when we were in Portland. But anyway, so this is part of this episode, which is we're in the same room, and that's probably going to be true for all future episodes. We will probably be in the same room recording because we were first.
Same warehouse.
We're in the same warehouse. Okay, just going to jump into this. So Nick and I are in the same warehouse, and we're here for a very specific reason, because both of our lives took a huge shift this past year. Obviously the Elijah thing, but exterior to that, previously for me, things changed a lot. So I guess I'll just jump into that. I was in Las Vegas. Obviously, it was PVK Vegas. And in October, November-ish, my brother passed away, and which was obviously was my brother, but it was also my business partner. And that was a huge, incredible loss that is just constantly a thing, and it will never not be a thing because of who he was, what he created, what he meant to the community, whether or not you knew him or not. He was one of those individuals that did so much so early that a lot of what we are doing now, obviously me personally, but obviously the industry as a whole, was affected by a lot of what he did in the early days. I'm not saying he invented the internet. I'm saying he was part of a very, very, very select few, being like 2 or 3, that pioneered selling knives on the internet, and who had a storefront in our hometown and was on the internet very early. And him and I were part of a lot of firsts in the knife industry. Just really quick. So in 2001, 2002-ish, he actually came to me, which was my first real interaction with the business. Was he came to me and he's like, okay, look, man, like, you're doing this thing with all this video editing and audio editing. And he's like, I want to do videos of knives and I want to put them on the internet. And I was super intrigued because at the time, that's kind of what I was like specializing in, which was filming things on digital cameras, which were this totally new thing at the time. Digital, right? It was non-linear video. So it wasn't half-inch VHS. It was mini DV at the time. And it was digital video, and I was encoding the video in like Final Cut 2 or 1. And so we were doing videos of knives. I was encoding them in QuickTime. We were putting QuickTime movies on the internet. And the website was videoknife.com, which you can check the Wayback Machine. Totally do. If you don't know what the Wayback Machine is, welcome to being a millennial. Google it. It has the entire record of the internet. But we were putting videos of knives on the internet way before YouTube. This was literally like years before YouTube was even conceived. Later on, I would upload those videos to YouTube, and they will live there forever, which is sort of a swing back to the Elijah thing. It's cool because the other day I was actually watching some of our old YouTube videos, and it was just great to sort of hear Josh's voice on the videos, and it's a great resource for very early knife stuff. Like one of our videos has like multi-thousands, and it's like an OG Marfion Dragon Slayer. Anyway, I digress. So he passed away, and that was super traumatic, and I don't really want to get into a whole lot of that, but that happened. And shortly thereafter, obviously I was in Vegas, and my landlord came to me and he was like, hey, I don't know if you spoke to your brother or not about the lease situation. No, I hadn't. And he let me know. He's like, well, this space, which I know a lot of you have been to, because I've talked to you about it. And if you haven't been, I'm sorry you missed out. But so we had this amazing shop location on Las Vegas Boulevard, directly across from the Aria, the Louis Vuitton shop, right beside Planet Hollywood. So people famously would just come leave the USN gathering and like 3 minutes away, come to the shop. So we had this amazing location on Las Vegas Boulevard. And it cultivated a community space inside a community for people to be at. It shows, and it was amazing. He did a really great job making people feel welcome, and running the business on the strip was intense. So my landlord was like, "Hey, like that's it. I sold this whole block. So the block between East Harmon and the Hawaiian Marketplace, that whole section. If you've never been there, again, whatever, that's all sold." And we were just there for USN a couple weeks ago or something. Anyway, and construction has started. So he was like, "Look, I'm giving you notice." So he was giving me like 6 or 8 months notice. And he said, you have to move out in this time. We never had a lease because it's Vegas. You just pay the rent, or you don't, and it's just break your legs. But he was like, you have to move out. And so I decided that between sort of Josh and my landlord letting me know that that space wasn't available anymore, that it was time to move. Carte blanche. I was never a huge Vegas person. I was born in New England, and I will always be a New Englander. So I was sort of upset that so much shift was happening, but embracing the opportunity to go home, because that's where PVK is from. This is where PVK is from, is the Northeast. So I decided to move. I decided to pick up and go back to a state that I was familiar with, both legally, financially, and historically. I had history with, vis-a-vis the knife laws, vis-a-vis doing business there, and being closer to home were all sort of top of the list. So yeah, so it was a lot. So closed the showroom in March, and got the process underway. And so there were a lot of logistics involved. The details are not necessarily the most important, but at the point where I decided that it was time to leave Vegas, where it was time for a shift and to get out of the city, I gave Nick a call, and we were talking and going over sort of, I was sort of spitballing this plan, telling him, what happened, or I mean, he knew we had talked previously, but I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This area I'm familiar with. New Hampshire's a good place for these reasons. I can deal autos there, and for me, it's close to home. And he was, in the same space. So he had, which we had talked about actually before on the podcast, he was sort of in this space of, wanting to get out of Brooklyn, well, actually technically Staten Island, but get out of there and sort of expand. And it's hard to find employees in that sort of metropolitan area, people that actually want to work.
Yeah, I reached the limits of what I was doing. Kind of the same thing. Jared was going over a story. The business originally started on a 4x4 foot table in the basement of a 200 unit apartment complex. And that's when it was essentially a hobby of mine. At a certain point, I realized I want to try this for real. I ended up in Jersey, with the NJ Steel Bearing crew. I did that for about 2 years. Ultimately, realized, okay, this is great, but I needed to move on to my own space. I was making enough and doing enough at that time where I was confident in my steps of being full time and as a knife maker. At that point, I made it back to New York in November 2017. I thought that would have been a 2 year venture, 3 year venture at max before I figured out what to do next, as I knew New York wasn't the end game. It's not really meant for manufacturing, as I was in Brooklyn, New York. Manufacturing in that area isn't cheap or easy, and the workforce just wasn't there. Ended up being there for about 4 years, just over. At that point, I reached the limit. It was me and my father for about 3 years at that point, and kind of about 2 years of searching for employees. Needed to expand, needed more people to help out, and I wasn't getting anywhere. Like, there's not manual, there isn't labor in New York for people that work well with their hands or creative. It's mostly artists on the creative side, not, let's say, sculptors or metalsmiths. And over the last year, like 2021, I was looking for other options. So I was looking at Florida, Texas. I was about to go to Texas and do something with Rob Carter. That was in the works for a few months there. Uh, but I didn't want to go so far away from the family. And at the same time, as I was figuring out my next step, as I knew it was going to be within the year, Jeremiah told me he was moving. So we talked it out. I was like, I could do New England. It's 4 hours from home. Uh, we're both kind of in the same industry. It was just neat to work side by side. We've always talked about both sides of the industry over the last few years. So we both talked about it, and it kind of our plans coincided, and we were both looking for space. And we ended up settling with one warehouse essentially that's cut in two, what we call the front end and the back end. And that's how we ended up in the same building pretty much. It's a 6,200 square foot building. Back half is pretty much a full manufacturing shop. It's way too big for what I was doing currently, but the plans are to go into a semi-production sort of atmosphere. Look for employees. Anybody's interested in the New England area, lower New Hampshire specifically, always shoot me an email. But yeah, it's pretty much how we ended up here. Just I'm going to be making full on, not say full production, not a semi-custom, semi-production. Autos is the plan. It was kind of planned for the prior year, but I just couldn't do it legally in New York, and that's where it gets a little dicey with hiring employees and doing something like that. But ultimately, I spent the better part of the pandemic planning this out, R&D for autos, running the numbers, figuring out every nuance of an auto, as it wasn't something I made before. There's different nuances to the lockup, the spring tension, everything about it. Also, the atmosphere of going from a one of a kind custom shop to something to a version of a shop where it makes the same part a few hundred times. Ultimately, I got to the point that I thought I was ready to do so and make the transition, and that's kind of just the timing coincided with Jeremiah's move, so we just moved over together.
Yeah, I mean it's logical. We had it all comes down to we had kind of always seen the future going this way. Like, when there were three of us, we always just made plans for the three of us. Like, of course we're going to do this stuff. And then, that just made sense. We know each other. We spend a great deal of time together. We go to shows together. We have the podcast. Like, it makes sense. We're already friends, and splitting a workspace, just it made sense instead of the both of us trying to sort of get our own space and go it solo in a new area. Just split it. Like, hey man, it's just like a house. You want to split rent? Let's do this. Like, let's dive into this, and we'll split up the warehouse. Like Nick said, the back end's NCC and the front end's PVK. So we got two, three character abbreviation businesses running under the same roof, and it's a big challenge. I'm not gonna lie. What both of us are doing is relatively unimaginable for most people because the logistics involved in moving. Nick moved, from New York. I moved across country. We met up at this space, and every day, we work on making the space more ours, and it works well because we're both friends, and we can both sort of help each other when needed. Like I can back up Nick on some things. Nick can back me up on some things. It's just logical.
We're both also verse on the industry. We do two totally different things in the industry, but at the end of the day, it's all about knives. I manufacture. He retails. Gives me some good insight about one side of the industry. Gives some other insight of the other industry. We always have talked about it. Uh, like I said, the three of us always did very similar things. Uh, we, we all did the same thing, me, Jared, and Elijah, but all different aspects of the industry. We always talked about individual aspects. If Elijah was still alive, he'd probably end up here as well. It was in the war. It was in the talks. Yeah, it was in the works. We were figuring it out, and like as we were figuring it out, unfortunately,
It's always worked like that with shows and whatever we're planning. It was just like inevitably like you don't have to call your friend to see if he's going. Like he's going. Like he's like you're gonna be there. Like obviously. So yeah, if Elijah was still alive, I'm sure he would be the third roommate. It's unfortunate he couldn't make it. He'll get us next time. But yeah, this is pretty far out. Um, and like Nick said, we're in the same game. We're just opposite, not opposite, but just different parts of the team, you know. But it's all about knives at the end of the day. I'm selling them, you know. Nick's making them. It's strange bedfellows, but it works. It definitely works. In this case, we're sharing a warehouse and we're sharing a living space.
yeah.
So
Surprised we haven't murdered each other yet.
yeah,
Hi, friend.
give it time, buddy. Give it time. Um,
Uh,
so yeah,
yes.
so that's a huge nugget here, which ties into many things, like Nick said. So we'll recap really quick. Yes, um, very good point. Absolutely. If the both of us are here running different businesses separately in the same facility. I am in the same boat. If it's not an all out casting call, but if you have an interest in cutlery and have some good references, I would definitely be interested to talk to you. Um, you can always shoot us DMs or emails. You know how to get in contact with Nick or I. Figure it out. That's part of your first.
If you've ever wanted to work with knives or craft knives, be a knife maker,
If you wanted to be, you know how you like things, but you wish that those things were in your bed. Those are knives. Hit us up. You'll figure it out. Like, if you want to be,
sure.
if you want to be around knives, whatever. Figure it out. You know what we're saying. We're not doing a whole great job selling it, but yeah, we're always looking for good people.
It's the first episode in a long
First
time. We're
episode,
trying to
yeah, we're trying
figure out how
here.
to do this, especially in the same room.
Um, but yes, so first thing, we're in the same space, so that's monumental. I don't think anybody in our industry is dumb enough to do that. And if you're looking to be part of something else, if you want to take your cutlery addiction to the next level and start mainlining that shit, hit us up. We're looking for good people. And, coming back to the podcast, this is, like I said in the beginning, we're in the same room and it's weird. It was a weird setup tonight. I'll get better at this same room engineering bit, but because we're in the same room, I also really am shooting for a more regular production schedule for this because Bladeology was such a big thing in the past to us. I mean, we had like definitely 4 listeners, so I'm sure they're going to be happy to have the podcast back. But because we're in the same facility, I'm definitely looking forward to producing more content on a regular basis because now it's easier than it was before. Before it was like it was always, I'm not saying it was a struggle, but it's easier when you're in the same building and be like, hey, like you want to sit down and record 20-minute episode real quick, like it's been a week or two, like yeah, let's do it. And it is different recording in person, being able to stare across the room and look communism in the eyes and just really absorb everything that it is. And if you haven't seen it lately, it's furrier than it ever has been.
Or I say something.
I mean, hey, I'm less furry than ever, so whatever. But yeah, so this is definitely this far out. I'm looking forward to the future. There's a lot to come. The podcast and from the both of us. I'm excited. I don't think it was super public that Nick had. I don't know. You talked to
No,
the Kentucky guys, but like
I've talked to a couple knife makers about it. I've kept it kind of private. Like I've had radio silence for almost a year on Instagram. Like to put in perspective how like this move happened. Uh, when radio silence back in November, that's when we started having talks about this. And the next 4 months was logistics, figuring out how to do this, how to move. Jared had to move a whole business cross country, and I had to move 40,000 pounds of machinery a few states over. Like figuring out logistics behind that took quite a bit. Uh, that's what I spent most of the beginning of the year on, getting ready for the move. Still made stuff up until about March, and the move happened in April. Once we got here, it's a commercial warehouse, but it wasn't exactly set up for what we were doing. Took a lot of constructions on both sides to get everything going. A lot of electrical work, a lot of plumbing, a lot of general construction, and then even after construction, the logistics of how things are going to be run here. As most people know, my dad has been full time with me for the last 3 to 4 years. Uh, so kind of losing that employee. He's still here, but he's not here all the time. He's here kind of bi-weekly at this point. So it's just me. Jeremiah helps on my side. I help on his side as needed while we were doing the construction and then setting up in the new facility. Uh, but there's still this transitional period that I've been trying to figure out. The knife shop just kind of got finished last week, and right now just the finishing touches are being put on, and by that it's literally just bolting things down and plugging them into outlets. I should hopefully be back to making knives at the pretty much in about a week and a half. Uh, this podcast is kind of a prelude to all that. It's pretty much forcing both of us to get on and record something. I have to get on IG and like rise from the dead. As it's been radio silence for quite a bit. But yeah, I'm excited. I've kind of been antsy to make something again. I haven't gone this long without making anything. I think it's about 6.5 months now. Uh, Last time I moved, kind of similar situation. Took about 5 months of construction and figuring everything out. So I was able to make stuff again. But of course, this move was a bigger undertaking. I had 3 times the shop versus the last move. And it wasn't just 40 minutes away, it was 5.5 hours away, crossing multiple state lines with 3 times the machinery. So thankfully, we're all in here, we're all set, everything is built out, things are running smoothly, and I'm excited to get back to making knives again.
Yeah, to give you like a super rough idea of how much insanity it has been, Nick and I have been in the same building, whether it be the warehouse or the house, since April, and this is the first time that we're sitting down to record the podcast. So that is how busy we have been. And not to say that the busyness is over, because believe you me, the business is a continual thing on both of our sides, certainly on my side and certainly on his side. I would have loved to take everybody from Las Vegas back with me, but unfortunately that's just not possible. And certainly the payload has tripled, or if anything is the same with just less people. So it's been crazy the last few months with the move, settling in on my part. Like Nick has construction and machining. I have lots of inventory. Inventory is insane. If you've ever moved, you might understand, but not really. Like, just move, but have everything have a tiny little barcode that has to be read, and then have a portion of the people, no fault of their own, not know what they're looking at, and then try to organize it all, count it all, do back to front inventory on a website, and it's a lot. So this is the first time we've been able to sit down and figure this out, because of the massive amount of work and logistics involved to just to get to this point where we have a couple of minutes to sit down and figure out what we're going to say and figure out how we want to present the future of not only our respective businesses, but certainly the podcast. And that's a huge part of it, which is, the future is a huge amount to take. And I've got a lot of plans for PVK, the things I want to do. And yeah, just as a total referendum, I don't know if anyone was aware of that, but like I was doing Nick's Instagram for like the last year.
And the reason I was radio silence.
Yeah.
Jer kind of ran. Well, he didn't kind of. He ran my Instagram for all of 2021 until life hit him in the face. Problem is when someone runs your Instagram for almost the entire year, and he's like at a short notice, he's like, I can't do it anymore.
I can't do this. I quit.
Yeah, I kind of forgot how to get back into it, and my workflow wasn't part of running it anymore. I'd supply him with photos and captions and stuff like that, but he was kind of my scheduler and editor to actually get it up. So yeah, when he dropped out on short notice, I was like, okay, well, I was busy. It was show season pretty much. That the last 3 months of the year is always hectic from USN towards New Year's, and I just got busy with making stuff. And then a month after that, we got into this whole thing of moving and everything else. So then life just took over. It was as soon as like okay, I got back into the rhythm. I had posts ready, and then we started working this plan out, and I was like, okay, I gotta tie up whatever I was working at the time in the shop. Like I didn't want to move over with half finished parts and whatever else. So just hustle until essentially the end of February to make whatever I can, and then all of March was prepping the shop, breaking everything down, moving everything around, packing everything, inventorying everything. Uh, because April 2nd was the day of the move, and that was fast approaching once February was over. And then it was just construction. I was like, yeah, just posting became harder, and was concentrating more on the day to day. That became more important.
He'll get back into the Instagram. That's another reason we're here is I can push him and be like, hey Nick, you got to post on Instagram. And that was a large part of, again, this first episode. As you can see, there's a lot riding on this first episode. There's been a lot of sort of radio silence surrounding all of this because we wanted to have everything just right before we sort of, came out to everybody. Oh boy, yeah, I know. But like we wanted to have everything just right. Like the amount that was going on, the amount we were dealing with. Nick hasn't posted on Instagram. Nick is terrible on Instagram anyway. But like if I've been trying to be even more on Instagram than I've ever have been. Hopefully someone's seeing that. But I'm trying to be like face forward on Instagram, and it's great. I like doing it. It's really encouraged a lot of people to reach out and put a face to the brand, and I'm happy with that. I love it. It's great to connect even more with everybody. But I haven't really been able to get into the specifics of the situation just because we haven't been at the point where we're comfortable being like, okay, things are kind of flowing. We're in like a nice state. Like let's discuss this and bring back the podcast. And getting on here was the perfect opportunity to sort of include you guys in what's going on this side, because like as Nick said before, the best part about Bladeology in the past was that we covered all of it. We covered the dealer, the maker, and the designer. There were the three of us that covered the whole portion of the industry, and now we're down to the two. So we're going to continue, but I think that the value added aspect is even more interesting now because we're in like a goddamn reality TV show here with Nick in the back and me in the front, and just screaming in Russian all the time, constantly. And then right, yeah, and then the podcast is here, so we'll be able to really like, I think this whole perspective, so we're gonna work on I have this whole list of very impressive knife makers who are going to come on the podcast, but also what we're going to do is we're going to try to do this more often and include you guys in sort of the process of what happens around here, just because like I couldn't sit here for another hour and describe to you the insanity that it took to get to this point. Also, side note, if you're a ghostwriter or a writer, I'm trying to write a book. I'm not even joking. Hit me up, shoot me an email. But my previous years, but definitely this year, it finally inspired me to start writing. And I've got a book in the mix. But yeah, so I think the podcast will be a great opportunity for you guys to really get like, between this and Instagram, like behind the scenes is not exploitive enough. Like it's like going to be some pretty interesting, spicy stuff that y'all be privileged to. But I'm excited. I think the future is great. I've got huge plans for PVK. I know Nick is cranking away on his auto, which I don't even know that you guys knew about. There's like auto projects in the works we can't even tell you about because
they were in the works in 2020, pretty much 85% done, and then the whole thing with like laws started to come up,
The whole
And
legal
yeah, the whole
issue.
legal thing and being in New York and making them started coming up while looking for hires. And yeah, like I was like, okay, like I'm planning on moving, kind of put them on the back burner and concentrate on BBMs at the time. Thankfully, that was a popular success. So just don't fix it if it ain't broke, let's say. And yeah, like they were pretty much done. The time part timer did start work at the shop, and that's when things started to like come out. And I was like, oh, like this isn't exactly what to do in New York. So that was when the inclination to start looking for a new space and move uh, happened because I realized that's what I wanted to do for the future of NCC Knives was go into a production auto environment. Still be making customs. I'll still be making frame locks. But like I said, we have a 6,200 square foot building. We each have about half of it, and uh, the section I'm in now is the exact section of my old shop that was about 1,500 square feet. And then there's still our whole warehouse space that's unused and planning. And big plans are in store for that area. Let's say.
So the way this is basically going to work is by the time that you hear this podcast, or I'm hoping to line this up so that it'll be on the same drop date, um, you'll be able to listen to this podcast, and probably about an hour later, give or take, there will be a shop tour on Instagram, which is Nick will jump on and do his side, and then I'm going to jump on and do my side, and then we'll meet each other in the
Break room, which is in the middle of the
I
building.
was gonna say poison area, but yes, break room, right? Break room, right? Yeah, it's where the carbohydrates live. But yes, in the center is the break room where the two businesses share a fridge and a sink and a table
An air fryer. Don't
and an
forget the
air
air fryer.
fryer. Yes, that's there's much to there's a lot of side projects outside of everything that are yet to be mentioned. We'll get into those in the future. But yes, so anyway, by the time you hear this, there will be a shop tour available on Instagram. So hopefully get on there, take a look, and it will better illustrate this thing that we're talking about. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my side. Yeah, I'm excited. There's a lot coming down the pipe for PVK. I just did a whole new sticker design over the last few months. So I've got some awesome new stickers that are going to come down the chute through orders, and I've got a whole column section. So depending on what you order, you get a different sticker, etc., etc. And I've got some new shirt designs. I just dropped my new Blade ad. I think that'll should be showing up this month or last month. They plan so far ahead, but I've got some new ads out there. I've always sort of been on top with the PVK artwork in the past, and I'm going to continue doing that now. I think there's a huge visual aspect to this business, which I absolutely love, constantly developing and having out there. We did the Deadlock shirt, which was totally awesome with Gavin. We did the Reaper shirt with the Reaper dual wielding some stilettos. So I'm excited. There's a lot going on, and I'm my next project for PVK is to dive into the development of the YouTube channel, which was sort of how it all started, and that's really there's a huge power in that for dealers, and I just like taking knives apart on video and sharing it with you guys. So there's gonna be more of that. But yeah, stay tuned. Lot to come, and it's gonna be pretty exciting. Nick, do you have anything else you want to add?
That was kind of covered it. We don't want to make this too long for the comeback episode. Like, yeah, it's also just feeling out for us to get back in the rhythm of it. You might hear a lot of ums and stutters, but keep in mind it's been about a year and a half since we did one of these. We were looking over them about last week, and I didn't realize how many episodes we had in the book. Uh, and then I was like, oh, I guess we did this quite a bit. Like, it's been some time. You forget. Towards the end there, I was traveling for shows. Jeremiah was traveling a lot for work, and Elijah was what I called a nomad. He just bounced around all the U.S. living in various places, figuring out what he wanted to do. And it was hard to record there towards the end. But like looking back on it now, I forgot how often we did it and how many episodes we actually did. And talking on mic again makes you realize how much of a muscle memory it is to talk on a recording. So hopefully by the time we get to the next episode, we'll be more comfortable, more of a smooth flow as we go along.
Stay with us. This is a wild ride that's just warming up. All right? Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. And now I will read you a passage from the book. Pieces of pulp, pressed, formed, and sliced. Happiness is the current, not the price. Do what you want in life. Don't trade it in for paper. Do yourself a favor. Take my advice. You'll thank me later.